Larry Arugundade, the National Press Center, Lagos. We have a representative for CDD. Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is your panel. Very powerful.
I'm the Acting Director General of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. Invited participants from the different political parties. And almost 80% on their phone. So let's pay attention to the what the panelists will be telling us. I think yesterday we were able to establish the point that our political parties are essential actors in developing our democracy and democracy anywhere in the world. So what they are expected to do most of the time is to aggregate the interest of all their members and citizens, in their own countries, and to ensure that this development, this democracy progresses. However, we noted yesterday that political parties, especially in deeply divided and crisis-ridden countries, are more likely to create more conditions, for confusion and for instability. And I think the point was made by the guest speaker that therefore there is a need, to have more discussions around issues that will help us to display their roles in this process. Colleagues, the panel, we have been given a very huge responsibility of setting an agenda for 2023, and the agenda is actually to discuss issues around political parties and how these parties, will play very important roles in moving our democratic process forward. So, what should we actually do to engender stability within political parties? The leverage of that stability is seen in 2023 and thereafter. What threats should we pay attention to? How do we handle our economy and politics in order to ensure stability of the nation? I hope that all of us will be thinking inside and outside the box in order to provide innovative solutions as we harvest your thoughts on this matter. I will give each of you here 5 minutes to have your reflections on the various issues, questions that I've asked, and many which you would want to reflect on. So let me start with Professor Samegu, who is the REC, INEC, Niger State. Some 5 minutes. Let's applaud.
Thank you, moderator. I'll try to do this in 5 minutes. I'm going to speak to 5 issues or 6, and I'll speak to them in bullet points so that I can do justice to 5 minutes. I think the first point I want to make, and that arises from the keynote address yesterday, is that I think political parties between now and 2023, and I'm speaking to all the parties, whether you classify them as major or Toyota parties. I think they must devote substantial time to speak to issues of national unity and national coherence. Because you have to have a nation first. If you don't have a nation, you can't even pursue politics, and you can't pursue business. I think the point Osadai was making yesterday goes back to the early literature on political parties, where political parties in Africa were touted as platforms of promoting national integration. And I think our own experience so far clearly shows that political parties cannot and have failed to perform that integrative function. And I think we should devote time to speak and reinforce issues of national unity and national integration and move away from the contestation around which region produces the president and address issues of governance. But we really need to speak to national, national unity and coherence. The second point is that political party issues of insecurity and peaceful election. Parties must lend their voice in terms of making national statements and appealing, to the gladiators, to really have issues of peace and, tranquility in mind. Because without that, you can't conduct any sensible election. The third issue that I think parties need to devote attention to, and is very urgent, is the twin issue of party governance and internal democracy. And I think it is a tragedy that the two major parties are in complete paralysis in terms of leadership. In other words, parties are not even governing themselves. And if they cannot govern themselves, they can't even aspire to govern society. So they must, and I think it's all about not even obeying their own rules, not obeying their own constitution, not obeying their own bylaws. And I want to take that up together with the question of transparent primaries, because that is going to be the foundation of free and fair elections. We don't have a situation yet where citizens can punish parties that present wrong candidates, even though it is happening in some local elections. But I think we need, for the purpose of parties reproducing themselves, they need to govern themselves, properly and follow their own rules, not the rule imposed on them. And at the same time, understand the importance of obeying regulation. Understand that there is a regulatory body and they have to work collaboratively with that regulatory body so that they can deliver election in 2023. The fourth issue I want to raise is that blueprint of what they want to do, not to simply, attack themselves on issues of regionalism, on issues of ethnicity. We need to, politics has to become a game of ideas. And the only way that can happen is that parties have to use their own programs and manifestos as the basis for reaching out to voters and mobilizing votes. If we don't do that, we'll get it wrong. The fifth issue is the need for parties to consolidate and clean up their membership register between now and 2023. Now, if you follow the ongoing amendments to the electoral law and the constitution in the National Assembly, direct primary, because direct primary is akin to conducting a general election the way INEC does it. You require full, register of your member. You need to bring out ballot box. You need to do this. The last thing, before you cut me off, is that I was going to make this point. The last session didn't even mention anything about the gender equality bill that is before the National Assembly. And that for me is a low-hanging fruit, particularly for getting women into parliament and getting them involved in politics. I was part of a discussion early this week about this bill that seeks to, by 2023, and it's a bill sponsored by the chief whip in the House of Rep and the Speaker, and they are proposing that every state in 2023 women, and that position is going to be contested by women only, and the whole state will be considered. Every state will produce two women into the House of Rep by dividing the state into two. and every House of Assembly, additional 3 women by using the existing senatorial districts. This is something political parties should jump, into and mobilize.
Let's listen to our colleague from AKS, Hamza Farsi Fihir. I'm sorry if I didn't get it wrong. Okay, so 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. I was here yesterday as well. So thanks again for Nipps for the invitation. It's an honor, and I really learned a lot about political parties' challenges in delivering their mandate and in facing challenges they have in the Nigerian. And I will also be referring to the keynote speaker, but also to other discussants of yesterday. I appreciated all the interventions actually, and the keynote speaker demonstrated the relationship between the political parties and stability, elaborating on the functioning of multi-party systems in what he called deeply divided societies, and how multi-party systems can help mitigate the centrifugal forces that are inherent to this kind of societies. He also referred to some mechanisms that can complete the multi-party system. He mentioned proportional representation, and one of the gentlemen this morning also mentioned it in his intervention. He mentioned the quota system, the elite consensus that can occur in countries. I think there is room to dig deeper into these mechanisms, and maybe for political parties to think through these mechanisms and maybe assess what can be adjusted, adopted, and adapted to the Nigerian context. And maybe this is food for thought. This is at least one of the takeaways I make from his speech. Other discussants also pointed out to dynamics that are not directly under the control of political parties, but influence the game, let's say. One of which is the lack of enforcement of existing rules and regulations, the lack of sanctions, which of course is not a real incitement for misbehaving political parties to change their behavior and behave properly. And this is one pending maybe element to address. Some others also mentioned CX and maybe other elements. But the keynote speaker and I think the majority of the discussants and speakers yesterday also pointed out to political parties themselves, calling them to boost their internal democracy, because indeed a functioning political party is a guarantee of a functioning political system, and when the political party is open, transparent, inclusive, representative, it increases, of course, the chances that the system and the institutions in the country as a whole are also open, transparent, inclusive, and representative. And this is maybe even more important in the Nigerian case, because political parties are the only, let's say, gateway for citizens to access power, and the only interface for citizens to have representation in the national institutions. They also called them to review the space left to money in politics. I think this is one of the key elements. Recalling the parties also that elections don't tell the whole story about democratic life in the country. It's not all about elections. There is life between two election rendezvous. And these moments are also to be filled by political activity led by political parties. I mentioned these elements because my main point maybe is that it seemed to be quite sort of a consensus, not only among the panelists, but maybe in the room, and it was also convergent with some findings that we did with ECDES. We conducted a study last year, an EPA electoral political economy analysis around the general election 2019, looking at electoral violence around the general election 2019. We conducted more than 90 interviews, met with stakeholders, etc. And the conclusions are quite similar to what has been said yesterday and today. So maybe my question, and I'm closing, maybe the question is, if you confirm there is this consensus about the diagnosis, how come the change doesn't occur? How come it seems so difficult to change things? I have a counter example of what I'm saying with the voter expansion, voter access expansion, which was a kind of a blockage for decades because of perception of political, maybe hidden agendas and so on. But recently, and you know it better than I do, INEC took a very strong initiative reaching out to all stakeholders, trying to convince with numbers, with data, with objectivity, the reasons behind the need to review the voter access expansion, the polling units basically in the country. And the political parties supported the change, and now the change happened. So it can happen. But how come on other matters like electronic transmission, like access for women, youth, persons with disabilities, these changes are apparently difficult to happen? Maybe, so to conclude, 3 opportunities I see ahead of 2023. One, indeed, my dear friend Rick from Niger State just mentioned it, the constitutional reform, the bill before the National Assembly that will allow, if it is passed, that will guarantee representation for women in the National Assembly. It can also be an opportunity for political parties to implement the same kind of quota systems in their own political parties for responsibility positions within the party, for leadership positions within the party. It can happen at the national level, at the National Assembly. Why it cannot happen in the political parties? Second opportunity I see is the new voters that will join the voter register. Alex started and resumed the voter registration campaign, as you know, and if the pace continues, INEC estimation is that we may have 20 million more new voters for the next rendezvous, which is huge. It's more than, it's double the country I'm from. I'm from Belgium, 10 million citizens. You will have 20 million more voters ahead of 2023. So how can political parties reach out to these new voters, educate them, sensitize them, bring them into the game? Maybe involve them in your work as political parties. This is an opportunity I see for you. And the final one is the electoral process itself. Maybe indeed this can be a moment for political parties to open the doors to INEC for the monitoring of the primaries and congresses, opening the books for the campaign finance, maybe other important topics. Maybe thanks to this kind of summits and gathering, you can identify one common objective for you to work on together and to implement during the upcoming electoral process. And thank you very much for allowing me to go beyond my 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Hamza from ECDES. Let's take the thoughts from Dr. Leonard Zenwa of IPAC.
Thank you for having me once again. For me, when I see just close to touring academics like Samebu and the rest of the faculty from Nipps, I'm humbled. I'm really humbled, and the whole range of experts that have appeared today for this particular program. But having said that, in setting the agenda for 2023 elections and stability in Nigeria, in intervening in this all-important discussion, three essential things forcefully thrust itself out. Let me repeat. In intervening in this all-important discussion, three essential things forcefully thrust itself out. One is the agenda itself for 2023 election. Two is the stability of our democratic polity. Third is the stableness of the Nigerian state. Again, let me repeat. The agenda for 2023 stability of our democratic polity. Then the third thing is the stableness of the Nigerian state. Now, having said this, all this conceptually talking into the unsuccessful effort for both core and adjunct stakeholders to build trust in our political ecosystem. Building trust in our political ecosystem has been a major challenge for the Nigerian state from 1914 to date. It's been a road of mistrust, a road of acrimony, a road of infighting, a road of contestation for the resource of the states, a road of how can we survive. And in all this, there has been a whole lot on how we can build trust in our political ecosystem. Now, what we have should ask ourselves, our political ecosystem is extremely diverse, it's highly fragmented, and in most cases, it's self-annihilating. All these are enduring facts that cannot be disputed. Now, how far we have done this by trying to build our political ecosystem should be a subject of deeper interrogation for every one of us here. For the agenda for the 2023 election, the two key drivers, not that they are the only drivers, but the two key drivers here, the political parties and the Independent National Electoral Commission. Now, the political parties, the primary election. Now, these two drivers. Now, on the side of political party, what we'll experience is we faced bouts of criticisms. We have tried to see how we can build some level of confidence around political parties in Nigeria. We have seen the motivations that have also led to formation of political parties in Nigeria, and why key Nigerians actually set out to be either members of political parties or participate actively in political process in the country. Now, what has come out very clearly is political parties are struggling to survive. Now, in this, what we have seen so far is we have the we and the them dichotomy. The we and the them dichotomy. Now, the citizenry, which is the larger universe, and the chunk of the electorate that actually votes. The citizens says that political parties in Nigeria have not fared better. The academics are on top of the political parties, they've not fared better. Now, political parties do not come from the moon. Political parties is a reflection of what is embedded or what is available within the environment that exists. And so, it is garbage in, garbage out. It's what is in Nigeria that the political parties are made of. So when you stand back and begin to talk about the political parties, when you stand back and begin to look at political parties, you should also have a mirror on yourself. What is it that I'm doing also as a Nigerian to also examine my role in political parties? Now, having said that, let me just move straight to the stability of a democratic polity. The core thing is basically we have to look at our transparency, we have to look at the privacy, integrity, affordability, and access. All conditions that make us to have good elections are the things we need to do to deepen our democratic culture and our democratic practices. I'm being stopped. I would have said more on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. When you want to stop the leader of political parties, you need to be very careful. But we're going to give you
Even the microphone is protesting that I stopped him. So I'll propose that we use our classroom voices. Yes, okay. So we have the next person, Dr. Julie Sander, who is the acting provost of the National Defense College Abuja. He's also going to share our thoughts with us. Please, let's move around.
Okay, good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I'd like to, add my thoughts to we're discussing the agenda for 2023. I think my task has been made easier by many of the comments I've made this morning. But it's important that I didn't say until I know that there's consensus around some of these issues. And I think that on the previous time, I think Paul was talking about, in response to the comments about what parties need to do to increase women participation and so on. And that's actually where I want to start, because we're setting an agenda now to discuss all the issues. And I think parties must be deliberate about increasing the numbers of women, of youth, of people living with disability. And I'm just going straight to my point that everything was to do with bullet points. Now, if the votes of women count, at elections, then if we're going to count the votes of youth, it's normal. But that does not mean therefore that they cannot be part of the political life. The deliberate and what must be done within the political party. There is what is called mobilization. You mobilize people around your ideas, around your platforms. It's the same thing. You must mobilize and conscientize the electorate and deliberately look out for these constituencies who historically have been disadvantaged, historically have been taught to be voiceless. And so obviously it's going to take a lot more work to get them back on board. But it is work that must be done. And the platform on which this work is going to be done is within the political parties. So that's an agenda for the political party. You must put on your agenda that you will deliberately, and it's not a matter of having women speak or youth speak. It's a matter of bringing them into the mainstream of whatever you're doing. In this room, for example, most of the women here are social provided as resource persons. The parties must deliberately have a forum like this, make a participation typically. It can be done and it should be done. And if I were Nipps, I would insist on the invitation that that's what must be done. So these are the kinds of deliberate steps that must be taken. You must have, conscious efforts within your political parties, to cultivate the membership and the interest of, women, of youth, and of people with disabilities. Professor Able talked about the gender equality day. We're not hearing the voices of the parties from that day. Are listening out. Well, okay, I can't tell you what the stand or the view of, party X, Y, Z is on that bill. And these are things that we need to be engaging. I like to say, yes, numbers count. I heard someone say they don't keep ranking the numbers well. Yes, we'll rank the numbers. They say they want those numbers to stand up and speak. Because those numbers that determine movements are the elections. And we're going to keep doing the conscientization. And I know that, different things are happening. But like I said, the focus, the main platform that needs to happen must also be the political parties. You cannot keep waiting for people to invite you, for you to come and talk about these things. We must see that the political parties themselves are interested and are taking deliberate steps, to work on this. Now, another issue I'd like to talk about, to point out also in terms of gender setting is, for the three groups I'm talking about in terms of inclusivity, the women, the youth, and the people living with disabilities, is they need to form intergenerational partnerships. Okay? So, yes, you have the youth, the women will not necessarily all the youth, the people with disabilities are not necessarily all youth, but there must be intergenerational partnerships. We have talked about, I think it was yesterday, somebody was talking about alliances and so on among political parties. And I think this cooperation and partnerships must become also, across these three categories in terms of, conscientization. You don't all have to be in the same political party. But right now, there's an issue that concerns all of us, and which is the issue of greater participation, greater representation. And so we must have one intergenerational partnership on those issues, and that the voice that is historically advantage for silence can begin to be very much louder. My next bullet point is election security and security. We spoke about that. So but the issue that we need to hear, more being done about right now before we get into 23. And the last issue I'd like to talk about also is the issue therefore where do we get the voices of political parties on the crisis of governance of development that is facing us now? We don't hear them from the 2023 and then we're advancing for change. We need to get the voices of these issues right now for the elections from now on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sende. Let's listen to Comrade Larry Rokundani of the International Press Center, Lagos. Comrade, can you hear that? And the completely answer is that I'll see the comment. Thank you very much. I pretty much agree with the submissions already made by the previous panelists. I think in terms of setting agenda, we're obviously looking at having a free, fair, credible, peaceful, inclusive, and of course acceptable elections. And I'd like to say that the overarching framework for this actually is for us to have good governance. And I'm glad the last speaker mentioned the crisis of development and infrastructure in the country. And we must be concerned about the fact that we do not have good governance currently, and that is reflected in the area of infrastructure. If we look at the roads, for example, roads have actually collapsed in almost all parts of Nigeria. And I'm getting worried if by 2023, INEC will not have to rely on donkeys and camels, to move electoral materials. This is serious. The other side of the coin is that when you do not have good governance, citizens participating in elections, they essentially don't see the rules are not there. Why do you want to vote? It's the same, promises. So when Professor Ebu challenges political parties
to talk about what they will do. I would rather say that political parties now need to talk about how they will do those things. But there's no promise that they are going to make that people have not really had before. The question will be, how would you do it? What would you do that would be different? And I think that when we pose questions like that, that will encourage citizens to participate in the electoral, process. But there are also other, prerequisites for good governance, and it comes by way of government creating a enabling environment for credible elections, political parties, being, the and allowing internal democracy, and of course, the security agencies subjecting themselves to the rule of the law, because you can't set an agenda for stable polity and elections without the security agencies clearly understanding that there are democratic boundaries for them to observe and follow. Now, critically, we need to talk about the CSOs, the media, and I would also include political parties there also, in terms of ensuring that we have what I call, democratic accountability in this country. One of the missing ingredients of our democracy is the fact that we do not hold our leaders accountable. So, in the media, for example, we challenge the media to monitor campaigns and document campaign promises so that we can hold people accountable on specifics. So, as political parties, even when you are not in power, it's part of your duty to know what those who are there have promised and hold them to speaking out when the same media is being guarded by through a number of what we call anti-media legislations. The truth of the matter is that we need the media to communicate our issues. Yesterday, when INEC had a meeting with the political parties, before you went for the closed door meeting, the first thing that happened was a press conference. So that clearly tells you that there's a message to pass across through the media. But where that media is facing challenges of survival, of even having its own freedom, I think that says that not just the media organization will pay a fine if certain provisions of the Electoral Act are free, but that individual journalists as editors will pay dirty fines and might even be imprisoned. And it is those kind of provisions that you see in the amendment to the National Broadcasting Act, the proposed amendment to the the Act establishing the Nigerian Press Council, and so on and so forth. So all these, are descendingly a political environment. And where the media is guarded, political parties are also guarded. Because it's through the media that you convey your messages. So the challenge I'm throwing is that if truly we're trying to set a proper agenda for 2023, we must be concerned about the survival of our media and the freedom of the media in Nigeria. So immediately, there is a collective responsibility on the part of everybody for us to hold our respective mandates as sacrosanct, and through that, help to develop a proper agenda. The final word, which has to do with the inclusive question, Professor Egu challenged us to be interested in gender equality bill, but that is a very good call. But let me also add that already we have a national gender policy that says there should be, equitable opportunity for women in political positions. So even at the level of the national gender policy, I think political parties can buy into that. So even while we are waiting for that bill to be passed, the gender equality bill, the political parties can also say, since there is a national gender policy, we will reflect that policy in the way and manner we select our officials, and in the way and manner we select candidates that will stand there for elections. I believe that if we do the totality of all those, we will have setting a proper agenda.
I would request you to ask questions and also to make comments. We have just 20 minutes to do this, and I will take comments and questions from those who have not spoken today. And so, yes, so glasses are obstructing. So let me take first two from my far right. I can see someone with the sign, no, not you yet, someone with the sign, two fingers up.
Oh, you've added 3. Then I don't. Okay, Professor Gabu, is that Professor Gabu? Okay, so Professor Gabu and our colleague who stood up first from that end. I will take 2 females far from the back, and then you, ma'am. I'll come back to this row. Prof, and then our friend with white and black hair. So let me start from here.
Okay, Prof. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a few issues to emphasize on. First, is to draw the attention of political parties to the fact that dispensation. Truly, they are not playing the role of opposition in the true sense of it. Because all along, you criticize, yes, it's good to be critical of the government of the day, but at the end of the day, it is expected that you offer the way out. What is the way out? If you say what they are doing is not good enough, because these security challenges we are confronted with, at the end of the day, it will consume all of us, whether you belong to that or you don't belong to the other party. That's number 1. 2, like I said yesterday, I think I need to emphasize on this. The language of political parties in political communication must reflect the status of political parties as civil organizations and not as a combative organization. Truly, if you listen to the way and manner political exchanges between political parties, sometimes it seems as if we are still in the politics phase when we are actually in the governance phase. As if they are still campaigning when we should be promoting good governance. That, to me, is a very serious issue that I think political parties should really address. And the last one, sir, sorry, very fast, is the distinction between political parties. If you look at our experience in the Second Republic, UPN was known for free education. MPN was known for its housing policy. And then, what is this other party? PRP stood for, the emancipation of the peasants, the Kalakawas. And honestly, looking at the area of the current political parties we have, I cannot say, for one, what does PDP stand for? What does what is this ruling party? SEC. What does this stand for? And so many others. Honestly, I'm yet to come to terms with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. You've forgotten acronym of SEC. Okay.
Thank you, sir. My name is Otumba Adegberu, Oyo State IPAC Chairman. My questions are twofold. One to the political parties and the other one to the umpire, that is INEC. When the Kashina State IPAC Chairman was talking, he mentioned the issue of winner state first. It's been observed that even our representatives, after being sponsored by a political party and they've won the election, maybe to the House of Assembly. So the nomenclature, maybe 15 for the ruling party, 5 for the opposition party. We found out that in 2 weeks' time or even in 2 months' time, these people would defect to the ruling party. And the political party that sponsored them has no authority to checkmate them. So what is the way forward on this?
Okay. I think since this session is on certain agenda, the question that you just asked, we thought that you will have something to suggest. So all our colleagues who would come up, after him, please kindly make your views known in the area of setting up agenda, not to still do the same lamentation and asking questions that we should be answering. Thank you, sir.
So on agenda, my own prayer to INEC is that once the House of Assembly and the governorship election is the most nearer to
the people. I think we should have a revised election timetable whereby they conduct the elections to the House of Assembly and governorship first, and the presidential one last. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. Okay, since the mic.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Wanganga Ide. I serve the professional women of Nigeria. My own intervention is on the issue of security. It can never be overemphasized. I think we should start thinking about setting the agenda for 2023. Another thing is the youth, empowering our youth and creating jobs. It's very important that our youth are gainfully employed or empowered so that they will not be available to be used for public, because it's only the youth they use for this. Another issue I want to really emphasize on is the enlightenment campaign by INEC. INEC needs to do more. In the last election, we noticed that a lot of people, there were divisions, there were war. People didn't understand you could be in any party you wanted in my own area. And we women noticed it. We came to INEC and told them this is the problem. You need to do some enlightened campaign in the southeast. But we didn't get the response we want. I think if there are any officials of INEC, they should look into it so that we don't have unnecessary communal clashes or family clashes, because people belong to different parties where they believe their ideology can be met. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Amina Ibrahim Zama. I'm from APC National Secretariat, also the head of strategy at Inter-Party Advisory Council. All these things we're talking about, as far as I'm concerned, the setting for agenda for 2023 will not make any difference as long as we as a people, because I think the things are becoming eroded and blurred between the parties. Because whatever we decide to do, especially when you look at what happened recently with the zoning, the parties are struggling to zone. We cannot zone on the sentiment of winning an election. We zone on the unity of our people, and that is what matters. Because at the end of the day, when Nigeria is not right, we all feel it. But we are not sincere to ourselves as a people. That's why when you are unable to win an election, you jump to the next party to win an election. You forget the people you are representing. Because whatever position you want to contest, you have to remember that there are people there you need to answer to. But if this thing has become eroded in Nigeria, I represent APC, but I know some people, tomorrow, my colleagues, I'll just see them in another party because they want to win an election. They don't really think of the people. So the agenda for 2023 is that whatever we do, zoning or whatever it is that the party is going to do, they should remember that's why the party ideology has been eroded. It has been blurred. We don't think of anything but winning elections. Parties are supposed to win elections. But on what basis? What are you trying to strengthen? What are you trying to entrench in Nigeria? The only way we can entrench this is to tell ourselves the truth. We are not telling ourselves the truth. If, for example, I'm giving an example, and I'm not saying it's like okay, if you say you are going to zone this because you feel this is the only way you can win an election, what of injustice? What do you want people to do? When people start fighting and it brings a lot of insecurity, then you start to question yourself. But we need to do certain things to make sure that we are on the right path as a people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Prof.
Thank you, Prof. I think for me, the minimum irreducible issue political parties will advocate in setting the agenda for 2023 is an insistence on the electronic transmission of results. Nobody has mentioned that up till now. So far, I've been extremely lucky in this country. Elections are conducted on Saturday. Usually we hear the results either late on Tuesday or early on Wednesday morning. For that to be possible, we bring the rep, the State Commissioner of Police, and the Director of the DSS from each state to Abuja with the hard copy of the results. Sir, I'm surprised you are keeping quiet. In 2019, you arrived there at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm not sure in 2023 we will try that. So let it be clear that the minimum irreducible issue on the agenda is the electronic transmission of. Let all political parties come together and say this, and let us see which political party will dissociate themselves from this kind of statement. If they can trust their money to electronic transmission, as we can see in the Panama paper, as we can see in the Pandora paper, we are not talking of peanuts here, we are talking of billions. Yes, you want fathers, mothers, uncles to bring results from Yola, to bring results from Kigawa by road in the middle of the night. I think that should be the first issue in setting the agenda for 2023 among the political parties. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, brother. White and black card.
Thank you very much. My name is Pastor Dan Okibe, State Chairman, NRA, and my part Chairman, Benue State. I want to direct my question to Professor Ebu. He made a very striking statement while he was responding to the question the other time concerning electronic voting. And I was shocked hearing such a statement from someone of his caliber. I want him to throw more light. While he was talking about electronic voting, he said his own personal opinion. He gave an example of a country like Germany, who are a country technologically advanced, yet they are not applying electronic voting system. Then he made mention of a few other countries who are using electronic voting system, but their technology are indigenous based. Then looking at the DNA of Nigeria, looking at the overdependence of human nature in our electoral systems, and everybody are clamoring for this. And we know technologically we're done. But what I want to hear from him in a meeting like this is that, what do we need to do if we are not going to go on the direction of electronic voting? What do we need to do differently from what we have been doing?
Okay.
Is there anything we can do differently for what we have been doing? Because we have seen that the introduction of card reader give us a lot of we made a lot of progress in 2015. So if we are not to go on that direction, can we do something indigenously that will reduce this human overdependence?
I saw some of our colleagues who throughout yesterday didn't say anything, and I think I would just ask Oga in blue. I saw you yesterday. You spoke very well, and you tabled a lot of issues. So I'll allow you to have a word, sir. No.
The chairman of this occasion, the panelists, my colleagues, leaders of political parties. My name is Engineer Yapaji Yusuf Sani. I am the national chairman of Action Democratic Party, ADP, the Credible Authority. I want to associate myself very strongly with the last speaker, but one, who says that there's an urgent need for you, the eggheads, and we, the leaders of political parties, to come together and help INEC to achieve this issue of electronic transfer of results. There has to be a concerted effort. It's not something we just address in passing, because the germane is fundamental. It is irreducible minimum, like he says, for us to get it right in 2023. Number two, there is a state capture in Nigeria, and is displayed more forcefully at a tier that is also very fundamental to success of democracy in Nigeria, which is the local government elections. It's an organized crime, like we know. And unless political parties and those who love this country come together to put pressure on the National Assembly to amend the law to allow INEC, now that we are bringing in this electronic means of transfer and management of the processes of the elections, I think it will only be one of those very important steps that we take in setting agenda for 2023 also. I think the rest are issues that most of you have talked about it, but I'd like to mention two things also. No, just one. Okay, one, which is that, you see, there is this universal law, which is Maslow theories of needs. Food, security, love, and you see, this is number 5 out of the 5 needs. So we have to understand the fact that Nigeria is in a very, very poor state to practice for its democracy, but we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have 8 more minutes to 12 noon. I'm assuming I'm going to give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 a minute each, and that will leave us with about 3 minutes. So if I have 1 or 2 persons with suggestions, not any comments, just suggestions on what we should do. Suggestions, no comments, no introduction. Okay, 1, 2, Comrade 3. So 1 more minute.
Thank you, Professor, for the opportunity. Yes, what I want to suggest is this. We have said so much. I think there should be a proposal. A memorandum should be forwarded to the National Assembly of the resolution of this very meeting, that this is what we want, and this should happen, and we should follow it up. Because if we just come here, sit down, talk, and go home and nothing happen, and each and every one of us seated here should be able to sign that document. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. My focus is also on the National Assembly. I think going forward, we need to ensure that effectively we close the doors to cross-carpeting, because what happens after people are elected is that they create artificial problems within the parties so that they can have escape routes to deal with the council of other parties. After having been elected on the platform of political parties. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Last.
Yesterday we talked about inter-party democracy in Nigeria, and we suggested about issue of coalition, alliances, fusion, merger, or what have you. I just want to give half a minute of what has worked. I was talking with a consultant that a state always win with 36%. And the rest of the 64% is shared within all other political parties. And they come up with this argument. If always the winner wins with 36%, why don't we collaborate and put our heads together? And that example was done, and there is a background on that. So I think this collaborative thing is an important thing for this inter-party alliance. Thank you.
Okay. So all the political parties that are here, and you think alliances, coalitions is something to take forward. It's actually a responsibility. So it's good that you mentioned it, and the leadership is here, and all of you are here, and I think you can discuss this. So let me allow the panelists to, I know not all of you have questions, but if you have some final thoughts in terms of suggestions, please raise them. So let me start from my far left, not because I'm a leftist.
Okay, thank you. I'm not asking any question. I just want to repeat the point that, political parties usually know how much energy they put into, courting members of other parties to cross carpet and so on. Is that kind of energy you need to put into courting, women and youth, mobilizing them into your party? So please let us be deliberate. Let us see your plans for voter education and mobilization, particularly the women and the youth. And I think you need to hold consultations at all levels of women. Don't assume you know why they are not participating, but you must hold consultations with them and also have some factual, empirical stuff on which to base your strategy going forward. Thank you very much.
We're very quickly, maybe I will make it a bit provocative just to mark the thought. If you want to win the election, maybe stop thinking about the election and focus on the policy, on engaging with people, and you have ideas that you shared with us this morning and yesterday, policy ideas, measures to be taken. I think, as my colleague also said, it can be useful to make these ideas disseminated in the public, known by people, and so people can start coming back to you, joining you, engaging and supporting you. So it was a bit provocative, but the idea is maybe ahead of 2023, the focus on policy can be, besides all the other elements that were mentioned, like internal democracy and so on, but focusing on policy can be one concrete and simple way to start with. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend from Benue. I think we have even discussed. I spoke, as my personal feeling, and then you express your personal disappointment. So, which is fine. I think on a more serious note, I didn't have express contempt for technology in election. And in the last few years, we have really leveraged on technology to do so many things, including the permanent voter card, voter registration, and so on. So it is not about contempt for technology. I was only speaking specifically about electronic voting. And my biggest worry is that anytime people talk about the electronic voting, they say we all use phone, we all use ATM. And the analogy comes from this, and doesn't go beyond that. My point has been that even when you are going to have money, the sensitivity of that system and the fact that you have to perfect it over time cannot be compared to the possibility of failure in the technology in a country that is so divided. If you have not tested this over time, maybe from small standalone election and then do voter education over time, it's not something you can jump into. And that's why I kept on saying, even then, those who master this technology are also very wealthy. And that's why I use the example of Germany. And even the whole debate in the US about the possibility of backing from Russia and so on. So this debate is there. But my final point on this, even if you still remain disappointed, is that when you are disputing election, the best thing to rely on is the paper trail. Be very careful. Be very careful. And that's why Germany, with all their sophistication, they are a big. So that's the point I was making. But you also need to read the literature on this. It's very interesting.
Okay, Professor, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to just weigh in on this as well. We've consistently talked about free, fair, credible, inclusive, and acceptable elections. Now, it is very imperative that we also talk about safety-laden election. So, going forward, safety-laden election should also come in because of the high level of insecurity in this country. So it's about time we begin to look at how we creatively develop templates in certain agenda for 2023. Develop a creative template to conduct election in high security trouble spots in this country. Now, that could be a task every one of us will have to put in, even though it weighs on directly on the security agencies to fashion this out. It's important that constituencies are also alerted on the need to be very secure on how to go about casting their votes during highly insecure security situations, as we currently have in Anambra today. Of course, yesterday we have to bring it to the knowledge of the INEC chairman that they need to look deeply on how they can address and work around this election in that state. We have different ideas that was posited there, but we're also looking at that because if you're talking about timelines, and you're talking about constitutional crisis. What is very important is if people who are the writers of the Constitution and the electoral ethics are not alive to do this, then there won't be any election. That's the point being made in this regard. So safety laden is important, and that's what we have to put at the back of our mind. Now, two, the other thing is this. Let me also demand, please, demands from political parties to excel. The demands for political parties to excel in Nigeria have become too burdensome. People think that the political parties are those that have the magical wand to address all the issues. Now, if we are all this together, the political party is what you make it to be. Now, the parties are not funded. The political parties are not funded. The political parties lack capacity even to undertake their own core responsibility on account of lack of resources. So we are also calling on Nigerians. Even members do not even pay their dues. We need to understand this. All members do not pay their dues. You see them, they make the most noise. You ask them to pay their financial dues. You cannot find, in any political party, cannot find 1% of the population of that registered political party paying their dues. The thing falls back to the leaders of the party, who will now go out to find a way to see how they can get resources to maintain the party. So when you place these demands on party to excel, you also understand in the environment which political parties are also functioning. So it's important this is put into greater perspective. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, Professor Ila, I had the question of electronic transmission of results in my notes. Somehow I missed it out, which is quite unfortunate. But there are two issues concerned with that, and that is why we are very interested in the amendment to the electoral bill in the National Assembly, and the number of us in the civil society are insisting that the version that should be passed is that one that was passed by the House of Representatives, because in their own clause 53 they made it clear that electronic transmission of results and other related issues to related to voting, electronic voting, shall be at the discretion of INEC. And so it's also a mechanism of preserving the independence of INEC when it comes to decisions on elections. And it should be a key resolution of this summit that we are supporting that. I also do not think that electronic transmission of results would mean automatically a negation of paper work. I'm assuming that
we still follow the procedure where elections are conducted at the units, party agents are there, they sign, the election result and so on. But if we look at the question of insecurity that Professor Yila mentioned, definitely there is a strong case for that. And that we have it in the electoral law also does not mean that it will necessarily apply immediately. But the good thing is that it gives INEC that power and discretion to use electronic transmission. I feel that it's something that we need to support, irrespective of the challenges that they might be facing in some other countries. Nothing says that where Germany is afraid to tread, Nigeria to tread there, based on our own integrity in this country. So I feel that it's something that we need to really support. Thank you very much.
Also, thank you very much. I think our panelists deserve another round of applause. Let me close by supporting the position of Dr. Sanda on women. And this is a direct response to Comrade Dan, who made the point about women not following up political events and are not sensitive, to development within political parties. Comrade, I think that we have a role, whether we are political parties, or we are trade unions, or we are civil society organizations. Our role is basically to generate more members. And what we do is to convert, those who don't even know anything about what we are doing into very activists, individuals and groups that will be very helpful, to what we do in these organizations. So if women, we think women, those that we have recruited, are not doing well, the role of the political party, irrespective of whether we have resources or not, but one of the things that I know political parties do and trade unions do is to have political education, for their members, for consciousness raising and for political activism generally. So I think that we need, as political parties, and I think that this was one of the points we made in our last discussions, that we need political parties to have political education units which will help, on a regular basis to conscientize their members. And that will help in sustaining and keeping the organizations, very lively. But I think what we have done here this morning to this afternoon is a fundamental agreement around the following issues: that political parties have roles to play, and these roles are many, including voicing out concerns about national peace and unity, voicing out concerns around insecurity, and also playing very significant roles in making sure that the organizations remain democratic, and also to relate with other parties of with parties that have same similar objectives in the area of either alliance building or coalition building. And the need, to start thinking about 2023. What blueprint do we have, to attract, people to our parties, and also convince them to stay with us, and convince them, to work with us. We have that role. When I say us, that's political parties. There's also agreement on issues around taking into consideration what is going on in the country. We should use the opportunities that are available to us, the constitutional reforms. Our voices must be heard at that level, and the issues that we think should be addressed by the constitutional reforms, should also be on the table, so our voices must be heard. New voters are being registered, and what do we do with them? Political parties have roles to play in attracting them, and also to make sure that the electoral process, it's the one that can generate free and fair elections. I have an understanding that we all agree there's a need for more inclusive political processes in our parties, increasing the role of women and the activism, within our political party organizations. And I think one interesting point that Dr. Sanda made, and she's been making this point for quite a long time, issues around intergenerational partnership in order to promote inclusivity. Colleagues, these are some of the issues that have been raised. I must mention what Comrade Larry made about his own constituency. That for us to think about 2023, we must pay attention to what the media is doing and ensure that media survives, under conditions where they're being capped. We need to support that position. Finally, I want to thank you for listening and for giving this panel a great deal of support. Thank you, and God bless you. Yes, and do I have the power to dissolve? Because I didn't constitute, so you can.
Thank you very much. Please, let's give a round of applause to the chairman of this powerful panel that stands unconstituted.